On paper, $250,000 puts you in the top slice of American earners. In reality, a family that layers on a $4,500 mortgage in a prestige zip code, 2 private school tuitions at $20,000 each, 2 $900 luxury SUVs, and high childcare costs can burn through more than $140,000 a year in fixed expenses before groceries, travel, or retirement contributions. After taxes, that leaves barely $2,000 a month for everything else, including savings. That is how high earners end up living paycheck to paycheck and staring down retirement with low six figures instead of the millions they would need to sustain their lifestyle. The poverty line for a $250,000 household is not about income. It is about how much of it you have already given away to your zip code, your school choice, and your car payment. You wake up, you go to a high-stress job. You do everything right according to society, but your bank account at the end of the month looks like you work part-time at a hardware store. That is the functional poverty line, and millions are trapped in it. If you want the best return on investment for your time today, hit the subscribe button. I am Tom, and I spend hours digging through Federal Reserve data, Yahoo Finance reports, and forum posts so you do not have to. I run the numbers on what it actually costs to live the American dream today. Right now, that dream is getting highly expensive, and the math is completely disjointed from reality. We are going to walk through the exact breakdown of where $250,000 goes. We will look at the taxes, the phantom costs, and the specific choices that drain the wealth of the top tier. If you are earning a high income but feeling completely broke, you are not crazy. The game is rigged against the default path. By the end of this conversation, you will have a clear framework for identifying these fixed cost traps and stepping off the treadmill before it grinds your retirement plans to absolute dust. Let us start by looking at the core myth of the high earner. There is a very common belief that if you can just crack the $250,000 mark, all your financial anxiety will magically evaporate. You assume you will be taking European vacations, maxing out every retirement account, and drinking coffee that was ethically sourced by monks. But I have noticed that the higher the income goes, the louder the quiet desperation becomes. This is the setup for what we call the functional poverty line. It does not mean literal federal poverty. It means a mathematical state where your high salary produces zero surplus. Your income acts as a massive river, but your lifestyle choices have built a dam that diverts every single drop before it reaches your savings. The assumption is that wealth equals income. But wealth is actually what you do not spend. When you cross the $250,000 threshold, society expects you to act like you are rich. And acting rich is the fastest way to ensure you never actually become rich. Let us run the hard numbers on this because the data is staggering. According to CNBC, about 14% of United States households earn $200,000 or more annually. Yet, a massive chunk of these people fall into a category called Henrys. That stands for high earner, not rich yet. They live paycheck to paycheck and struggle with rolling credit card debt. A recent report, summarized by Yahoo Finance, noted that 4 in 10 workers earning more than $500,000 a year say they are making only minimal progress on their financial goals. 4 out of 10. $500,000 a year. The Federal Reserve Economic Wellbeing Report backs this up, showing that inflation and prices remain the top financial concern across all income brackets. When I read that, I had to laugh, because it proves that earning your own spending habits is mathematically impossible. If a $500,000 household is broke, a $250,000 household is swimming in dangerous waters. Why do we fail, even when we know the math? It comes down to the psychology of invisible spending and lifestyle inflation. When you get that big promotion, Your reference group immediately changes. You move to a slightly nicer neighborhood where the baseline expectations are totally different. Suddenly, driving a 7-year-old sedan feels like a social failure because your neighbors are leasing luxury SUVs. You are not trying to be flashy, you are just trying to keep up with the new normal. But that new normal is a financial sinkhole. We convince ourselves that we deserve these upgrades because we work so hard. It is the classic trap of tying your self-worth to your fixed monthly overhead. You start justifying every expense as an investment in your family or a necessary convenience for your stressful life. But your stress is actually coming from the fact that you have locked up 90% of your future labor to pay for things you bought yesterday. The mental toll of this invisible trap is absolutely exhausting. The solution here requires a complete rewiring of how you view your paycheck. The protocol is to stop measuring your success by your gross income and start measuring it by your free cash flow. Free cash flow is what remains after taxes and mandatory fixed costs. If you make $250,000, but your fixed lifestyle consumes $230,000 of it, you are not a $250,000 household. You are a $20,000 household. That is your actual functional income. Once you adopt this methodology, you stop looking at a bonus as permission to buy a new car. Instead, you view it as raw material to increase your free cash flow margin. The specific action step is to calculate your personal functional income today. Take your take-home pay, subtract your absolute survival and contractual obligations, and look at the tiny number left over. That is the only number that matters. We need to fiercely protect that number from the traps we are about to discuss. If you think the psychological pressure of keeping up with the neighbours is bad, wait until you see what happens when those neighbours start talking about where their kids go to kindergarten. Most people assume the mortgage is the biggest wealth destroyer for a high earner. But there is a silent, entirely optional expense that routinely wipes out $50,000 to $80,000 of after-tax income every single year. And the wildest part is that parents will fiercely defend this expense, while simultaneously complaining that they can never afford to retire. Let us look at the absolute black hole of private school tuition. The initial situation usually starts with the best of intentions. You have kids, and you want to give them every possible advantage. You tour a local private school with pristine tennis courts, a robotics lab, and organic lunches. It feels like an entirely different world compared to the crowded public schools you might have grown up in. The common belief is that private education is the ultimate investment in your child's future, and that if you have a high income, it is your duty to pay for it. But this is where the $250,000 poverty line really begins to bare its teeth. What starts as a noble desire for smaller class sizes quickly morphs into an absolute financial chokehold. I have seen families willingly put themselves on the brink of insolvency just to keep a bumper sticker on their car. They view private school as a non-negotiable utility bill, right up there with electricity and water. But unlike water, the price of this utility goes up relentlessly every single year. Let us run the hard numbers on private school, because they are terrifying. According to Private School Review, the national average is around $15,000 a year. But if you live in a high-cost metro area, that number is a joke. Financial Samurai highlighted a Bay Area school charging $39,600 per child. Let us be conservative and say you find a moderate private school for $20,000 a year per child. For 2 kids, that is $40,000 annually. But remember, you pay tuition with after-tax dollars. If your effective tax rate is around 30%, you need to earn nearly $57,000 in gross income just to cover the tuition check. In places like Washington, D.C., forum posters routinely cite spending $86,000 a year after tax on 2 teenagers. That requires over $120,000 of gross income. At a $250,000 salary, you are spending almost half of your total earning power just to keep your kids in plaid uniforms. That leaves almost nothing for your own future. The hidden cost here goes far beyond the tuition check. The psychology of private school is rooted in deep parental guilt and social conformity. Why do we fail to make the rational choice here, even when we know the math is bankrupting us? Because pulling your kids out of private school feels like a public admission of financial defeat. You worry that your kids will fall behind, or that you are a bad parent for prioritizing your retirement over their 7th grade Latin class. Furthermore, private schools come with secondary costs. There are the mandatory fundraisers, the expensive ski trips, the pressure to host lavish birthday parties. You are buying into a social ecosystem where the median household income might be double or triple yours. Trying to swim in that pool when you are at the poverty line of $250,000 is exhausting. You are essentially paying a premium to feel inadequate every time you attend a parent-teacher association meeting. The specific action step here is not necessarily to ban all private schooling, but to rigorously apply a return on investment methodology to it. The protocol requires you to calculate what that $40,000 a year would do if invested in a simple index fund. Over 12 years of schooling, that is nearly $500,000 of principal alone before compounding. The mindset shift is realizing that financial security is actually a better gift to your children than a private high school diploma. You do not want to be a burden on them when you are 80 years old because you spent your retirement funds on their middle school tuition. Evaluate the public schools in your area without the bias of prestige. Often, you will find that an engaged parent with a stable, stress-free financial life produces a much better outcome for a child than a stressed-out parent writing massive tuition checks. Do not let parental guilt mask what is essentially a massive wealth transfer away from your family. This is where conventional wisdom says you should scrimp and save on small things like coffee and avocados. I am going to tell you to completely ignore the small stuff for a minute because it does not matter. The leak in the boat is not a $5 latte. The leak is a $5,000 monthly anchor dragging along the bottom of the ocean. Most people stop analysing their budget right here and quietly lose $50,000 a year in opportunity cost. We are about to look at the structural trap of prestige real estate and luxury metal. If you get this next part wrong, no amount of coupon clipping will save your retirement. The initial situation for most high earners is the hunt for the perfect house. You finally have the income to escape the starter home. The common belief is that buying the biggest house you can afford in the absolute best neighbourhood is a guaranteed path to wealth. After all, real estate always goes up, right? So you target the prestige zip code, the one with the tree-lined streets and the perfect public schools. Ironically, even if you are already paying for private school. You want the safe investment. But this is where the trap snaps shut. Buying into a prestige zip code forces your fixed baseline costs through the roof. It is not just the mortgage, it is the property taxes, the elevated insurance rates, the landscaping expectations, and the sudden urge to remodel a perfectly functional kitchen just because it does not have quartz countertops. The house stops being a shelter and becomes a consuming entity that dictates exactly how hard you have to work for the next 30 years. Let us run the hard evidence on housing and cars. In coastal metros or premium suburbs, median home prices often sit between $1 and $2 million. A typical high earner mortgage will easily run $4,500 to $7,000 a month. Let us use $4,500 for the mortgage, taxes and insurance. That is $54,000 a year gone. Now look at the driveway. Experian data shows that the average new car payment is around $748. But a high earner is not driving the average car. They are leasing luxury SUVs that cost between $900 and $1,200 a month. Two of those vehicles add up to about $1,800 monthly, which is $21,600 a year. Combine the house and the cars, and you are sitting at over $75,000 in after-tax money just to maintain your address and your commute. On a $250,000 gross income, you are bleeding over 40% of your take-home pay to banks and automotive lenders before you have even bought a single bag of groceries. The psychological twist here is why intelligent people willingly sign up for this level of debt. The hidden cost is ego. We fall into the trap of believing that our housing and our cars are reflections of our professional competence. If you are a senior director at a tech firm, you feel a bizarre internal pressure to drive a car that matches your title. You park your identity in the garage. Furthermore, the neighborhood wealth illusion tricks you. You see your neighbors driving $80,000 cars and assume they can afford it. You do not see their credit card balances or their zero balance brokerage accounts. You just see the shiny sheet metal. This creates a feedback loop of normalized financial insanity. We fail to realize that paying immense interest to a bank does not make us rich. It makes the bank rich. We are simply acting as a conduit, passing our high salary directly to lenders in exchange for the temporary feeling of looking successful to people we barely even know. The protocol to escape this is to fundamentally decouple your ego from your real estate and your vehicles. The specific methodology I want you to adopt is the structural limit ratio. You must force your combined housing and transportation costs to stay under 25% of your gross income. If you make $250,000, that means your absolute ceiling for mortgage, taxes, insurance, and car payments is $62,500 a year. If you are currently sitting at $75,000 or higher, you have a systemic emergency. The action step is to stop viewing cars as rewards and start viewing them as depreciating liabilities that steal your freedom. Buy a lightly used, reliable vehicle for cash and drive it for 10 years. If you must live in an expensive zip code, compromise on the square footage. Choose the smallest house in the best neighborhood rather than the mega mansion. Protect your margin at all costs, because your peace of mind lives in that margin. We are about to bring all these numbers together into a single, devastating master equation. Most people never aggregate their expenses like this, because staring at the final number induces a mild panic attack. But if you ignore this next step, inflation and fixed costs will quietly eat 40% of your retirement before you even turn 50. We will get to the exact portfolio allocation and the alternative path in a minute, but first we need to tally up the final blow to the high earner budget. Childcare and the true reality of what is actually left in your checking account. The initial situation for parents trying to maintain two high-income careers is the absolute nightmare of childcare. You cannot work without it, but paying for it feels like taking out a second mortgage. The common belief is that childcare is just a temporary phase, and you just have to grit your teeth and survive it. While it is temporary, the damage it does to your wealth compounding years is permanent if you do not plan for it. When you stack childcare on top of the mortgage, the cars, and the potential private school tuition, you create the master equation of the working wealthy. This equation is exactly why a household bringing in $250,000 a year can feel mathematically identical to a household earning $50,000. The inflow is massive, but the outflow is structurally locked by legally binding contracts and societal expectations. Let us look at the final aggregation of these costs to see exactly why the margin for error drops to zero. Let us run the hard numbers on the master equation. The Federal Reserve report shows that among parents using paid childcare, over half spend at least 50% as much on childcare as they do on housing. If your housing is $54,000 a year, childcare easily runs $27,000. Now, let us map the math for a $250,000 gross income. First, the government takes its cut. Between federal, state, and payroll taxes, assume a 32% effective rate. That is $80,000 gone immediately. You are left with $170,000. Now subtract the fixed lifestyle costs we discussed. Housing is $54,000. 2 moderate private school tuitions are $40,000. 2 luxury car payments are $21,600. Childcare and basic activities are $27,000. Your total fixed overhead is $142,600. Take your $170,000 net income and subtract that fixed overhead. You have exactly $27,400 left for the entire year. That is about $2,283 a month for groceries, healthcare, travel, clothing, emergencies, and retirement savings. It is a mathematical dead end. The psychological twist here is the profound level of stress this tiny margin creates. When you only have $2,000 a month of actual liquid flexibility, any slight breeze can capsize your financial boat. A sudden property tax reassessment, a health issue, or a transmission failure becomes a full-blown crisis. Why do we fail to fix this, even when we see the math? Because the hidden cost is the sheer momentum of our lives. It takes massive physical and emotional energy to sell a house, pull kids out of a school, or downgrade cars. We become paralyzed by the friction of change. So instead of fixing the root cause, we try to out-earn the problem. We work longer hours, take on more stressful roles, and sacrifice our health trying to pour more water into a bucket that has a giant hole in the bottom. The stress comes from knowing, deep down, that one bad breakaway at work means the entire house of cards comes crashing down within 90 days. The protocol to survive the master equation is to completely change how you categorize your budget. I want you to focus exclusively on the methodology of fixed versus variable expenses. You cannot easily hack your way out of a legally binding mortgage or a car lease. Therefore, your primary defense mechanism must be keeping your fixed contractual obligations as low as humanly possible. The specific action step is to perform a fixed cost audit every single year. Look at every dollar that leaves your account automatically and aggressively seek to downgrade the commitments. If your fixed costs consume more than 60% of your after-tax income, you are in the danger zone. The goal is not to stop spending money entirely. The goal is to move your spending from mandatory fixed categories to optional variable categories. If you have extra cash flow, you can choose to take a luxurious vacation. But if times get tough, you can instantly cancel a vacation. You cannot cancel a bank loan. Keep your lifestyle flexible. Before we get into the exact retirement math and how to completely reverse this trap, I want to invite you to join our inner circle. If you are serious about escaping the high earner hamster wheel, click the join button below the video to become one of the optimizers. Channel members get priority comment replies, so if you have a specific question about your own fixed cost ratios, I will see it and respond. You also get custom sketch badges that level up the longer you are part of the community. It is a great way to support the deep dives we do here while getting direct access to the conversation. Now, let us talk about the ultimate consequence of the $250,000 poverty line. The reason this video is titled "Why High Earners Cannot Retire" Because when your free cash flow is choked to death, your future self is the one who takes the bullet. Let us look at the brutal reality of the retirement gap. The initial situation for retirement planning usually involves a vague sense of optimism. You assume that because you make a lot of money, your retirement accounts will naturally swell to massive proportions. The common belief is that high earners automatically become wealthy retirees. But retirement readiness depends entirely on the gap between your income and your spending, not the absolute size of your paycheck. Fidelity and other financial institutions generally suggest saving at least 15% of your gross income if you start in your 20s and want to maintain your current lifestyle. But as we just saw in our master equation, a family locked into heavy fixed costs barely has enough liquid cash to cover groceries, let alone squirrel away 15%. The trap is that high earners build a lifestyle that requires $20,000 a month to maintain, but they are funding their retirement accounts with the spare change they find in the couch cushions. The math simply does not support the dream. Let us run the hard evidence on this retirement gap. On a $250,000 income, a 15% savings rate requires putting away $37,500 every single year. But in our fixed cost scenario, the family only had $27,000 left for everything. That means their realistic savings rate might be 0 to 5% of gross. Let us assume they manage to save 5%, which is $12,500 a year. Over 30 years, even assuming a solid 7% market return, that only builds a nest egg in the low to mid six figures, maybe around 1.2 million. That sounds like a lot until you realize that replacing a $250,000 lifestyle requires $3 to $5 million in assets under a safe 4% withdrawal framework. You are mathematically short by millions. I have read forum posts where parents explicitly admit they are sacrificing their entire retirement to pay for elite private schools and prestige mortgages today. They are trading their financial independence at age 60 for a slightly nicer driveway at age 40. The hidden psychology here is the delusion of tomorrow. We constantly lie to ourselves and say we will start saving aggressively once the kids are out of daycare, or once the car is paid off, or once we get that next promotion. But Parkinson's law of money dictates that expenses will always rise to meet income unless there is intentional friction to stop it. When the daycare bill goes away, it magically turns into club sports fees or summer camps. When the car is paid off, the kitchen suddenly needs a remodel. We fail to realize that time in the market is the one variable we can never buy back. Every year you delay compounding because your money is locked up in a luxury lease is a year of exponential growth you have permanently destroyed. The psychological trap is assuming your high income will last forever. But corporate restructuring, burnout, and health issues do not care about your mortgage payment. Assuming you will earn top-tier money indefinitely is a very dangerous game. The specific protocol to fix this is to entirely reverse the mathematical order of operations in your life. You cannot pay your fixed costs first and save what is left, because there will never be anything left. The methodology is to pay your future self first, directly from the gross income, before the money ever hits your checking account. You must force the 15 to 20% savings rate as your absolute primary fixed cost. On $250,000, you automate $50,000 into your 401k, backdoor Roth, and brokerage accounts immediately. Then you pay your taxes. Then whatever is left over is the hard ceiling for your housing, cars, and lifestyle. If you cannot afford the private school after paying yourself first, then you cannot afford the private school. It is a harsh truth, but it is the only way to break the poverty line trap. You have to artificially constrain your present lifestyle to guarantee your future freedom. It takes discipline, but the alternative path is incredibly rewarding. Let us look at the alternative reality. The road not taken by the typical high earner. Imagine the exact same household making $250,000 a year. But instead of falling into the prestige trap, they make slightly different fixed choices. They buy a modest house in a good but not elite public school district. They drive one reliable older car and one modest new car. They utilize public schools instead of private. This is not a life of deprivation. They are still taking vacations, eating out, and living comfortably. But their structural foundation is built on rock instead of sand. They do not have the quiet desperation humming in the background of their lives because they have deliberately chosen a reference group that values wealth accumulation over wealth display. The common belief is that making this choice makes you cheap or deprives your children. In reality, it gives your children the greatest gift of all: parents who are present, unstressed, and completely financially secure. Let us look at the math of this alternative reality. Here is the hard evidence of the alternative path. Same gross income of $250,000. Same taxes of roughly $80,000. But their fixed costs look very different. Housing is $40,000 instead of $54,000. Private school is zero. Cars are maybe $10,000 a year instead of $21,000. Childcare is $20,000. Their total fixed costs drop from over $140,000 down to $70,000. Now let us run the master equation again. $170,000 net minus $70,000 fixed equals $100,000 left over every single year. They have nearly $10,000 a month in free cash flow. If they choose to save just $50,000 of that, which is 20% of gross, they still have $50,000 left for incredible vacations and guilt-free spending. Saving $50,000 a year over 25 years at a 7% return yields over $3.3 million. Combined with employer matches and home equity, they easily coast into a $5 million net worth. That is the structural difference between the poverty line and being rich enough to retire. It is the exact same salary, but entirely different fixed choices. The verdict here is clear. Your income does not determine your wealth. Your fixed cost ratio determines your wealth. A $250,000 salary is an incredible tool, but it is just a tool. If you hand that tool over to real estate agents, car dealerships, and elite private institutions, you will work your entire life to build their wealth instead of your own. The poverty line for high earners is a self-imposed prison constructed from social expectations and ego. But the beautiful thing about a self-imposed prison is that you hold the key. You can choose to downsize. You can choose to drive an older car. You can choose to ignore the neighborhood arms race. When you do that, you reclaim your income and you buy back your future. Stop acting rich today so you can actually be wealthy tomorrow. The math never lies, but it is up to you to decide which side of the equation you want to live on. I want to hear your peer review on this data. Have you felt the pressure of the $250,000 poverty line in your own life? Drop a comment below and let me know which fixed cost trap is the hardest to avoid in your city. Your real-world experiences help ground these numbers, and I read every single one. If this conversation brought you value, hit the like button so the algorithm knows to share it with other high earners who might be feeling the exact same silent financial stress. And do not forget to subscribe so you never miss a breakdown. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Keep your fixed costs low, guard your free cash flow, and I will see you in the next one.